Because of the
I think this is a great segue, actually, to reintroduce to everybody the Citizens for a Better Bridgeport. It was formed about 4 or 5 years ago to deal with the conflict of interest issue we had with city employees also going on their own raises and perks and contracts on city council. We've come a long way with that. We haven't managed to pass it through both houses of the legislature, but we're still working on it. Another issue has been financial accountability and responsibility and transparency, and that's where we are. I happen to believe we are in dire straits. The last time a mayor kicked the reval can down the road, which happens to be this mayor, he wasn't with us at that time, my taxes doubled. This time they've only gone up 20%. So I'm up, my taxes have tripled over the last number of years. This is not sustainable, not for us in Black Rock, not for us across the city. We are all going to be bankrupt, and the city is going to be bankrupt. So what I would suggest to everyone is that we need some sort of control. We need some sort of process where we have people who actually understand consistently what the issues are and how they might be controlled. And I would urge you to support the creation of an independent financial control board. And by the way, we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what the particulars are. That's not relevant tonight or going forward in the near term. What's relevant is we get our arms around this budget, we get our arms around this situation, and we get it under some kind of control. To that end, I will tell you that August 1, there is another city council meeting. I would strongly urge you to attend. I would urge you to bring all of your friends across the city of Bridgeport so that the mayor and city council understands this is not, you know, we're mad as hell, we're not going to take it. Oh, should I put on SPF 30 or 45? Let's go back August 1, and let's get this done. We are going to hold Citizens for a Better Bridgeport, a meeting probably at the boroughs to be announced. We need participation. We need participation across the city. And I really hope all of you who have been directly, perhaps most directly impacted by the lack of determination to control the issues that we've got, will jump in here. We need voices. We need boots on the ground. I hope you will tell your friends across and support some sort of control board that gets this city's finances honest, transparent, and accountable to its residents.
How do we go about getting that legislated? How do we get that approved and passed? Because we can complain and get in front of a hearing.
The details are kind of, they're fluid, regardless of the source you go to. Typically, it is a mayor or with the backing of a city council that requests that, or it can be a member of the legislative delegation with delegation support who requests it. It's a state statute. So it has to come from the state, not putting you on the spot.
I do want to.
We're going to be looking for support from our state delegation. And I think it's important that we all step up and get something done here.
I think Steve should probably speak more to that, Steve.
Yeah, so I do want to comment on it. I think.
Can you just come over here, Steve? Because it's.
Yeah, sorry. I think. I don't know that anybody's sort of. Oh, yeah, sorry guys. Steve Stastrom, I'm the state rep for 129th District, all of Black Rock, and points elsewhere. So I do want to just touch on it real quick. So I don't think anybody has sort of looked exactly on what the formal, it will take a legislative act, I believe. And I think, you know, generally, so, okay, that's great, pass legislation. In order to pass legislation, practically speaking, this is something, it's going to take the support of the city as a whole. It's going to take the support of the mayor. It's going to take the support of the city council. And it's going to take the support of the entire legislative delegation. Because typically when legislation is passed in Hartford, in order for other towns, Lee can comment on this too, he was up there for longer than I have. No, typically when there's legislation that just impacts one town, you know, it has to be the town that sort of comes with a unified collective voice that says this is what our town wants. If there's a fracture, then things get picked apart. So it is important to build consensus around it, which could take a little bit of time, number one. And number two, we don't go back into session until January. I think in addition to pursuing that, there's another avenue that we should also be talking about. And that is, you know, as Ken mentioned, as Scott and Katie mentioned, so much of the city's budget is fixed cost, and so much of that is our long-term debt and our long-term obligations. I think today, this week, the mayor could panel a Blue Ribbon Commission, if he wanted to, of experts from around the city, around the state, to do a real deep dive into the city's long-term debt and long-term obligations, present a report to the city council, to the budget committee, to the public that says, this is exactly what our debt obligations are, this is exactly how much we owe MERS every year, this is exactly how much we owe in pension plan A, this is exactly how much, John and I have been working a little bit, I've got some information for you, John, I don't have all of it, but we've been working on trying to dig through some of what this is. What exactly does the city owe every year for the next 30 years, 40 years? And are there opportunities to sort of restructure or refinance some of that debt? I know Ken did a little bit of that this year. They refinanced some long-term bond funding, saved a little bit of money. We worked with the city, the legislative delegation worked with the city, this MRF payment. We actually didn't pay that this year. We didn't pay the $5 million. It was supposed to be $7.5 million. The city's only going to pay $2.5 million this year and next year. So that's down the road to pay as well. That we still have to make due on the state to that. So I think we could start sooner than passing legislation. We could start this week if the mayor and the city council wanted to.
It would be helpful then if the mayor returned Dave Walker's call, who has offered to create this.
I think we could
qualified to do that.
I think we could do that Blue Ribbon Commission starting now, and it would be a you know, it would be a lot quicker in sort of getting to the heart of the issue than a financial control.
To our city council members, support. Can I say one thing? I'm representing a situation where I believe, I've been here for 35 years, and I define BlackRock as having a generation from one reval to the next. And with each reval, a certain, the older generation gets kicked out because they can no longer afford to stay. The difference is, it's gotten to the point that you can no longer sell your home. You literally have to give it back to the bank. And that's the situation my mother is facing, and it's serious because she's in a hospital bed in our house. Now, we had to take out a reverse mortgage from the last reval where they way over assessed our house. And I went and I hired an attorney, and I couldn't get them down to a realistic number for the house. And they upped it again. And I have to wait 2 years before hearing. And this is crazy. I mean, why does the state have to drag this out so long and prolong the pain, number one? Number two, why should someone's property taxes not be capped when they reach 75% of their income? Right. It's insanity. It doesn't happen anywhere.
So on the first point, for reval is set on a statewide basis. We do, for state statute, for as long as I think anybody can remember, reval is supposed to be every 5 years. The first 5 years, it's a statistical reval, which basically says, look, I live on Fairweather Terrace. All the houses on Fairweather Terrace, the property values have gone up by, have gone down by 20%. So we're going to reduce everybody's assessment by 20%. On Ames Boulevard, they might have only gone down 5%.
Ours went up.
So everybody
Ours
goes,
went up,
whatever. That's a
down.
statistical reval. Every 10 years, what they mandate is a full reval, and the full reval is where they actually come to your house and do it. The reason it's only every 5 or 10 years and not every year really is cost. I mean, Ken can probably speak to it, but what's the cost of just the statistical reval, let alone the full reval, which is more? I think it's $300,000.
The total over the last 4 years.
So a lot of towns actually have come to the legislature and asked us to extend the period so that you don't do reval as often.
Some
Because
states
they
don't
want,
even use
because
this
they want to
system,
stay.
Some states use it as a 2%,
Right,
of
and
the
some
cost of the house
in
sold for.
some states, this gets to a broader question. I had an op-ed in the paper Tuesday, if anybody saw it, but really talked about sort of the property tax structure in general in the state, and sort of it's totally dysfunctional. It's totally dysfunctional. because we rely as a state far too heavily, as you talked about sort of with county government or regional government, regional services, we rely almost exclusively to fund our municipalities on the property tax. So there's the inequity from one town to the other to the other.
It's like a
But
colonial
since,
fight, and it
but
doesn't
since
work.
the towns are so dependent on that money, that's why they have to do, they do reval every few years, and that's what the state says. And I forget your second question, sorry, you had a second.
Well, no, my only question is, why does this, I mean, maybe this has to be addressed at the state level, because in Bridgeport, there's
Oh,
not
the
really
property tax
meaningful,
cap.
there's not, property tax is
So,
not meaningful senior tax
So
relief.
there's a little bit
Or
of
a
senior tax
maximum
credit,
raise
but
that
I,
you can do at any one time.
that's coming.
That's the most important
We actually
part.
passed last year, we passed, some people, you might have read about it, SB1. And this is the bill we passed last year it's pretty revolutionary in Connecticut, where we take 0.5% of the sales tax now. When you go to buy a pair of slacks in the Trumbull Mall, you still pay 6.35% sales tax. You're paying the same you've ever paid for that pair of slacks. But instead of that full 6.35% going back to the state, as of this year, the state only gets 5.85%, and 0.5% stays in our region, which is Bridgeport, Trumbull, Stratford, Eastern Monroe. And the sales tax generated in that region is dispersed back to the various municipalities, sort of on a formula based on income and population and the like. That funding is what allowed us to cut and cap the car tax at 37 mils, going down to 29 2 years from now. We also were able to, we didn't discuss this, but in addition, the city of Bridgeport actually got $7 million in new revenue over and above what it received last year from that same revenue source. And as that pool continues to feed out, there'll be additional revenue that comes from it. But that revenue came from, even in the year we cut, 900 million.
Was that $7 million in our budget?
The, part of it is, and part of it was not known until after the budget.
Part of it, that's
was
that
adopted.
extra 2 million. So they were afraid it was only gonna be 5, and it ended up being 7, so I think that's the extra 2
Should
million.
there be a system if we get that money in that pays certain things?
Yeah,
for certain
and so
quarters
what I was
and
gonna say,
not
so
just
part of our
disappear
bargain,
into the nebula?
part of our bargain with the cities, when we started giving them that money, and every town's gonna get it, not, Bridgeport gets a disproportionate share compared to our suburban neighbors, as it should, but we get, as part of that bargain we struck, we're giving you extra money, the city had to agree to a spending cap of 2.5% starting next year, where if they go over 2.5% in a spending increase, the state takes that money back.
Half the money, yeah.
And then we get more taxes.
All right.
Mike,
I don't want to monopolize their meeting, but.
But what you've done is effectively,
Hold on,
I'll-
one at a time, everybody
you
please.
killed the real estate market in Black Rock.
Yeah,
Done.
it's dead.
that's it.
It's
Wait,
dead.
how have I done
I'll tell you.
You.
Sorry.
The city
The
has.
real
The
estate
city
market
has.
in Black Rock.
Vision appraisal.
is what we've done now, okay? And what you haven't done is all these people that now have gotten reduction, you're doing nothing to enhance their properties to make them more valuable at some point in time. Father Panic Village abatement, new train station brings nothing to the party, okay? These people are gonna lose 40% of value for the next retail, if not more. And what's gonna happen? You're gonna be back to square one. You're gonna be increasing their taxes again on a smaller base.
Right.
Retail.
So,
So that's the problem. Forget about these global discussions about blue ribbon panels. What's that gonna do? They can't sell their houses.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, that's the
the
problem.
bottom line is.
And you know
this-
what? Let me tell you the rest of the story. The curbs are all out of whack on Fairfield Avenue. The city got sued, there was a $662,000 lawsuit from a woman that tripped on a curb, or a curb sidewalk. The sidewalks are ferocious. The lights over at Ellsworth Field don't work. Okay, you don't have any cops walking the streets on Saturday nights. 2 cops walking the street. Got 9 of them up at Trumbull Gardens, we got nobody in Fairfield. I mean, want a list? I'll give you a list of 1,000 things. Brennan's lot on Fairfield Avenue, it's a blighted lot. Cut the trees down and clean it up. Why isn't anybody enforcing that? I mean, these are just local issues that'll just enhance it a little bit.
Actually,
We pay for it. We're not getting our
he has
fair
been
share of what we pay.
communicated to, he has been requested to take care of his
Oh,
lot.
yeah,
We've
you know,
already
put a
followed
shoe
up
on
on
wood.
it.
I hear that all the time.
No, well, I have, so.
You live here. You live on the same block.
I already reached out and it's being in the process of being taken care of. He has a health issue right now.
Katie, the big problem is that it's property tax. I mean.
I guess, honestly, yes, it's my biggest problem
I
too.
mean, and I understand all these problems, but it's a system. I mean, I don't know how much of his systemic in his budget was because of reval, or how much was because of, you know, fixed costs, but, you know, people were talking about a financial review board, and I was a legislator before Steve, and I lived through the financial review board. And it wasn't something that actually we wanted, it was something that was imposed upon, it wasn't something and when the experience that we had is as far as the Bridgeport financial review board, is a big joke, because they had no power. And by power, I mean, I think Ken will probably verify this, is that the biggest problem is that some of the fixed costs, and probably a lot of the large costs of the pension. I mean, I don't know if people realize how Bridgeport got into this financial mess, but you know, a lot of it goes back to you current. That when there was a automatic escalating clause for police and firemen. So which means that if you retire, the captains get a pay raise, the people who retirees get a pay raise. So it was that we ended up having to pay for, and it didn't just start out with police and fire, it spread to every collective bargain and every union in the city of Bridgeport. When it was passed, Stuart McKinney, Sr., said this will bankrupt the city of Bridgeport, and it's true. I mean, we may talk about bankrupt, that we're not in bankrupt now and things are better, but that's only because they boasted up the taxes on everyone over here.
Right.
So I mean, so it isn't like it's any better. It just shifted the burden like the revaluation does.
Right.
So I mean, and honestly, until you deal with the systemic things, and if you want a financial control board, which you can't have it so that they can't look at long-term contracts. Yep. I mean, and when you look at long-term contracts, they say, well, constitutionally you can't impair legally long-term contracts. But there is a way of doing it, because if it's unconscionable, you know, and the legislature can pass a prima facie, you know, I'm talking legally, a lawyer, not a lawyer, but you can have, if you're going to do it, you better have them have real teeth, because it was a joke the last time, and everybody knew it. And when they did Jewett City, who also went through a financial review board, they had a lot more powers than they did for Bridgeport. Right. So Dave Carson, who was sitting over here, will tell you that they couldn't deal with most of what they were supposed to deal with. So
and I think that's part of my point. Is Hartford actually tried something similar last year? The new mayor of Hartford, Luke Ronan, came in and actually proposed. I don't know that it was a full financial control board, but he tried something similar. He went to the legislature with it, sort of without building enough support statewide, without building enough support in his delegation, without building enough support in the city council, with his school board, with his unions, the like, and it went down in flames.
He also asked for money with that, though.
Yeah.
Did he ask for money?
He asked for millions of dollars.
Okay. But that wasn't why it went down. I mean, it went down because of unions.
Here's the problem that you have, Steve, is that you have 169 towns, and you have a mill rate in Greenwich maybe 12, and ours is over 55. There's something wrong with this.
Right. Yes, that's it.
And I can tell you things that you can do about it, and I know it's very hard because the urban legislators are
against it.
No,
they're not gonna do it.
Well, first of all, they're split, but they're a minority.
Yeah.
I mean, so the voting. But there's ways you can do it. Hartford, for instance, their assessments are not based upon ours is 70% of market value. Hartford's 60.
Right.
So that helps the homeowners. Why can Hartford?
And their mill rate's 74.
But okay, but that's because 60% is it's the homeowners who are getting a benefit, right, and they shift it onto the businesses. You could also do things like I proposed to you, I mean many times, is that there's a way of doing judo, of letting the towns, because they're never going to do something that isn't going to entice it, but it lets them reduce their burden on their towns and shift more into the businesses, because one of the problems that we're all having in Bridgeport is the disparity. Who wants businesses want to come to Bridgeport when they're going to be paying 55 minimum wage when they can break the zoning in Greenwich?
And this is a broader discussion. But I'm looking around this room. I know people who own businesses, own property who are sitting in this room, who I'm sure are sitting here saying, wait a minute, we got hit just as bad as the homeowners did. You really want to drive?
This is not on the bit of what I told you. I want you to understand this. This is the misinterpretation of it. It's not on the one who has to make this election. It's not enforced. It doesn't mandate it every town does it. It's the suburbs have to agree to put it on their towns. It doesn't affect any business in Bridgeport. All we do is they get a third, by doing this. We get a third to reduce our millage,
Right.
and a third goes to block grants that everybody can help out.
And I get this you know, this is not solace to anybody, including me, who's had my taxes go up this year as well. But, you know, like I said, we, for 200 and 300 years, however long the state of Connecticut's been around, the only source of revenue up until last year towns have ever had in the state is the property tax. We gave them a small percentage of the sales tax last year. It's not enough, but it's a start. It's a chip away at this mentality in the state.
It used to be regionalization, and they undid it.
Actually, when you wrap up, we want Donna is next to go.
Because you wanted to talk about this financial review board, and what I'm saying is that may be a thing to do, but you know, Hartford has to recognize that this disparity is killing us, and they don't realize that.
But I think my point is twofold. I think one is there's stuff we can do now before January. Number two is, I think we need to have a broader conversation statewide about this that includes other towns as well. Because if Hartford's asking for this, and Waterbury's asking for it, those are allies.
Are they still in Urban Caucus?
Yeah.
Good to get them on, have them do it.
And Donna, you're next.
Very patient.
She had her arm up for like 10 minutes back there.
That's all right. I have a couple of things. Number one, I've been hearing for a number of years that in 2017, we are going to have a $1.5 billion shortfall in unfunded mandates. And I heard this number 5 years ago.
Is that a B on the front of that? Not an M, that was a B on the front of that.
And 5 years ago, it was $1 billion, so it's gone up to $1.5 billion. And so I just want that to be out there. The other thing is that this is not personal to anybody, to Ken or city council representatives, but I think, for me, this is like a crisis in confidence. I was on the city council, and I was on the budget committee and contracts, which is another eye-opening experience, for 2 years. I want you to know what your budget is. First of all, it's more than $500 million. At that time, it was over a 400-page document. None of the pages were numbered. You could take out 10 departments, you could drop it on the floor. It was in mice type, and Humpty Dumpty could never put it back together again. It is numbered. I looked. The pages are now numbered. But when I got my budget, I looked at it and I said, what am I supposed to do with this? One of the first things I did, and he may never forgive me, is give it to John Lee. I know him to be an honest man, and he has an expertise in pension and other financial instruments. And he looked at that for me. And I had other people that I would refer to. But I don't feel that our city council has the expertise to independently challenge something that the mayor is handing to them for approval. By the way, for the record, I voted against the budget every year that I could, 2 years, but I voted no, and I used it as an opportunity for a 5-minute dissertation on why I voted no. And that's what I'd like to see is independent thinking, and maybe take some of your, what do we get, $9,000 a year, and what's that thing? Take half of that. Take half of that and invest in a municipal financial accountant or something. There are 13 unions. There is a category called grants. Do you know how slippery and confusing that is? And at the time when we had Mr. Sherwood, I'm going to be honest with you, because I've had it, and I think it's a moral issue now, that our taxes have gone up this much. Because they're not going up because we have great schools and we've got great infrastructure. It's going up because nobody is minding the store, and and it's institutionalized issues. This isn't something that happened this year. It's been going on for 30 years. So we had a budget chairman who was also president of the, he's not president of council, maybe, but he was. And I said to him one night, I said, gee, your wife is, because you work very hard on the budget. It's every night, weekends, everything, for a couple of months. I said, your wife must really love you. She's here at this hearing, And she said, oh no, she works in that department. Did that man recuse himself? Did anybody on the city council, as a relative, or as an employee, recuse themselves from the vote? Not if you get a 20-0 vote. Nobody's doing that. We had I heard Mayor Testa's mistress was on the, bless him, he should take more Scott. There's all kinds of nefarious stuff, but you can't get to it because it's so convoluted and so labyrinthian. You can't do it on your own. You really, and I think that's where the crisis of confidence comes from. I don't think there's anybody on that city council that has a checkbook with a $500 million in its balance.
And what's your suggestion?
Pardon me?
What's your suggestion?
What's my suggestion?
Financial control board?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
I've got a suggestion.
And not the mayor's blue ribbon panel. No. It's
You
gotta be
need the financial control board, but you need to give them some power.
Yes, and it can't be
And one way of doing that, ladies and gentlemen, not you two up there, one way of doing that is what is used in the corporate world all the time. You create an escrow account.
That's right.
You pay your taxes into an escrow account. The beneficiary is the city of Bridgeport, and this control board administers and adjudicates how that money gets paid out. And there are certain guidelines and steps that they have, that these people have to meet in order to get, otherwise they go into bankruptcy.
And I'm trying to help.
Yeah, no, I
Escrow is the solution to this.
John?
That's right, we should do that.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank
We're
you.
done.
Sorry about the Mayor Testa.
Everybody needs a love life.
But I really just want to exhort you, because we can't, you've put a stake in the heart of our home values. Paul Timpanelli's talking about economic development. Does he have a list of tenants? He never talked about
Glory
tenants.
failed, we gotta regain our.
Nobody's coming here, so you need to have a vision, there should be a vision of where we're going in this city, because we will be bankrupt.
And everybody's gonna wanna leave. That's the sad thing. That's the sad thing.
John?
Donna said she handed that off to me, and I still had the bag that the book came in. But for the last 6 years, we've been learning. One problem, where do we go from here? Well, a lot of people here were not at the budget hearings. Okay, you've got to pay attention to what's going on in the kitchen. And this kitchen this is your first year in the kitchen, right? When Donna was here, we had 2 positions in the legislative budget. There was one filled, legislative assistant, who did research of some type. Another place that was unfilled. We call that a ghost expense, because that budget wasn't filled at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, but it was part of the way that I guess Mayor Fabrizi had some extra money around it at the end of the year. And we also didn't get, Ken, as Fairfield got, we didn't get those 12-month reports so that you could balance out what was really spent during the year.
It's going to be presented next week to them with the new.
Pardon me, Scott?
I promised you we were going to do it.
I understand.
We're going back to do it.
But there's a resistance initially, but
That's
Ken
true.
is going to give us the 2015 report that is available after the CAPR so that we can see, and then they'll do the 2016. All right, what else didn't happen? The budget that was given this year to the city, to these guys and the other 18, didn't have any numbers of personnel. There was, after the mayor's transmittal letter, which you're not familiar with, but I commented on a few times, there was always a chart, a table of organization for the city side, not the Board of Ed. Board of Ed was in there with its 2,100 or some odd number of employees, but on the city side, Mayor Finch liked to be able to point to where he cut, and whether he was cutting grants employees or whatever, I don't know. But I have nothing to, I cannot trust what has been said this year about cutting because there's no data, okay? Where were you on December 1st, and where are you now? That's a challenge I give to you. Second one.
And we'd like it online, please.
Yeah, well, okay, has the
August, in mid-August, supposedly all this stuff is going on this
has
new
the adopted budget
Open
gone
Bridgeport
online?
website. It's in the last stages of being finished.
Okay.
Hopefully within a few weeks it will all
Okay,
be on
so
there.
the adopted budget isn't online, but.
Well, the budget's online, but hopefully all the
The adopted is online?
No.
the proposed budget, it should be it should be. Yeah.
Wait a minute,
I gotta talk to the OPM guy. I thought he put it
The proposed budget
on.
is online. Is the adopted budget that you voted on, is that online yet?
Right.
No, okay. When will that go on?
I have to talk to the OPM director.
When
And
part of the
I
news
thought it
that
was
hit
on
the
it.
Connecticut Post was that we were gonna have open, accountable, transparent governance. And that's something I've been pushing for a few years. That was something that I think Gana must have seen, and it sounded good, but whether you can spell it out, that's different. So one of the things that you need to know, these pension costs have gotten by there was a police contract made for 2012. It took till 2015 to get it, right? Yes?
Yes,
You know
I know.
the history, right?
I know they're getting paid
Yeah,
on
it won't
outside
happen in
overtime.
Fairfield.
The pensionability for outside overtime,
Okay,
yes, I know
so the
about.
pension was made, and no comments ever been made in the Connecticut Post about what happened with that pension, okay? And what happened with that pension is that the police decided they wanted a contract to get into the state plan. And the state plan gives credit for overtime, okay? You know what that means? It means that a patrolman who was earning $61,000 gets a 50% pension after 25 years. The old way, that was $30,500. If I'm wrong, somebody stop me. Now, if he has 3 high years in his 25 years, again, it's been negotiated, so if he's earning 100,000, 150,000, 190,000, and 200, anybody for 200? Then he's 50% at 25 years of that. My goodness. So we had one pension plan that we were paying in the B plan, and the B plan were for people from the mid-80s forward who were hired then, and their plans were pretty well funded. But we had to transfer money to the state for that, and now we have this additional payment for these overtime that wasn't calculated. So we're negotiating again. Now, labor relations was something Tom McCarthy, president of council, was in. He never spoke to this. So if we're gonna have labor relations where these types of contracts with these big commitments, open, accountable, transparent, I guess you vote on this stuff, and you know, you haven't yet, but you vote on it, the public's gotta know about it. They gotta know what the downside is, because we're finding out now. And then finally, Ken, you're saying, and you've got a position to hold with credit authorities, credit rating agencies, so things aren't dire. But when we came out of that first financial review board, we had $55 million of city fund balance, okay?
Now
Right.
we're down to 13.7, yes, I know it well.
So what is it down to now?
13.7.
And if you don't get it all, was that at the end of 15?
That was this last, well, we haven't finished this year's.
I know
audit,
that.
So
So
the end of 15.
are you giving us a preview?
I wish, I hope.
Okay.
I can't say that yet.
Okay, so you
I'm
don't know
trying to
what.
finish off this deficit year to see how we stand.
All right, so if there's a deficit, does that reduce the city fund balance? Yes, okay. So that's the real drive to get this down, because a city fund balance, according to the policy that's in the budget book, which each one of us could go and read, it shouldn't be just one or two of us, but the policy for city fund balance is it should be running between
4 to 6%.
4 and 8%. 4 and 8%.
They'd like to see 6%, yes, which would be 30.
But our policy that's been in the books unchanged for at least a half dozen years says 4 and 8%. So 8% of what? 8% of $560 million? That 550, that'd be $44 million? It's 13. 4% would be half that, 22 million. Well, we've been skating under that for at least the last half of the Finch years. And that means that we have to do what? For cash flow purposes, we have to borrow. We've been in a very fortunate position. We're credit worthy for 4 months of lending you money for 4 months because taxes come in and they'll pay them right back. But on our bonding, it's less credit. So there are a number of things that that whether it's Dave Walker or just calling attention to contracts and whatever, and to dishonest numbers, final comment. The police department does not have 470 employees. That was the number in the budget book this year. And then it said next to it, vacancies, 17. We had 4 columns in the past. They had active, filled, unfilled, or vacant and new. This year we only got 2 numbers in that police department. And actually, as the chief says, there are only about 350, give or take a few at any time. So the budget was excess 120 because we don't have them. There are vacancies now. Do you doubt me?
No, I know we're in the process of hiring 100 this year, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you know that at the budget, were you there the night the chief talked to Scott or whatever? You weren't? I was. And I listened. And he said, you can't hire 100 in a year. There were 30.
30 were hired 3 months ago.
And there were
30
only,
being hired next month.
there were 32 hired. There were only 23 on the payroll at that particular moment 3 months ago. I don't know how many may have failed out or decided it's better to go to another town. But the 100 depended on 2 classes of 50, where we weren't even in the position of selection recruiting to get them trained. Takes 6 months for a class, I'm told. And the firing range has had problems because what they tried to do over in the West End, and now it's over at the, I guess what the transfer station just got changed around. So it was a dream, but you'd start off and you'd say we have 350 employees, not 470, and then sell us the dream, but don't put down phony numbers. And so you have to deal with what you've had to deal with. You're catching it from a whole bunch of sides. If you had a finance board, that's something else we could have in this town, which the last charter didn't do. You had a finance board in your community between the first selectman and the legislature. There was a finance board.
I only had 80 people looking over my shoulder.
There was bipartisan, yes? Were the people talented?
I would say so.
Yeah, I would say so.
But anyway, I don't.
I'm not saying, Scott and Katie don't claim to be talented in this area, they're learning fast, but, so that's another check and balance that was talked about here. So I'm just saying there are enough things that wasn't available to them. Legislative assistance, McCarthy killed that 4 years ago. A fit as Pete, the assistant was asking too many questions about money, about stipends, okay? You need to use your other services money. You've got $80,000 or $90,000. Don't let another year go by only spending $7,500. Okay? Thank you.
Hi. So, Scott and Katie, this is your meeting. I've been here for nearly 2 hours listening to everybody speak at your meeting. And I've listened to Ken and Steve and John and all of my neighbors. Believe me, I'm right there with them with pitchforks and torches. I would like to hear from the 2 of you, specifically, what are you going to do, each of you, not collectively, each of you, what are you going to do to improve this terrible situation that you have gotten us into?
Right. There you go. Okay. I'll go first. I'll go first. Honestly, I have to take a little bit of, I have to object a little bit to your comment because I don't feel particularly that I got everyone into the situation that we're into today. As John Marshall Lee, who has been looking at the city budgets for years, people have said, you know,
it wasn't John Marshall Lee who voted, though. It was you.
But okay.
Right. Right. You are the representative, not John Marshall Lee or Steve or Ken or me.
You campaigned for the job.
Right.
I did, but the financial situation that the city is in did not just happen overnight, did not just happen in the last 6 months.
I agree with you on that point. I am asking you, what are you going to do to improve this?
I'll speak because I'm
I'd
more
like to hear from
closely.
each of you.
Okay, but I'll speak to some of the budget matters that Katie's not on the budget committee. So, you know, in terms of
I
being
did
closely
attend
tied
many
to
of the
that.
budget
She
committee
did.
meetings leading up to the budget when I was on vacation, but other than that, I was there, so I was there.
So, you know, going forward, you know, already the mayor has proposed 2 initiatives that he wants to use to, you know, come up with some ideas. You know, the latest is the Second Chance initiative, And he's asking for $50,000, which, you know, out of 550.
Sorry, maybe I'm a dummy. What's the second chance initiative and where does the $50,000 come from?
Sure, okay, so the Second Chance Initiative relates to those who've been incarcerated, coming out, looking for a job.
Oh, people like,
And he readily, okay, so the 50,000 he wants to take out of, at this point, he first asked out of the police budget. And then, lo and behold, the OPM director, Nestor Niquo, found $40,000 of savings on a insurance bid, okay? So he wanted to use that. Now my inclination is no, because this is a budget, this was not an initiative he'd planned for, and quite frankly, when the mayor's office came to speak on this, they didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, they had no idea how they want to spend those $50,000. Now again, in the $550 million budget, it's a drop in the bucket. But the point is, we want to make sure that whatever the mayor has said, okay, we're going to spend this, that's it. We're not going to start anything new and start adding on new initiatives and roll the barrel up and, you know, keep things going.
But you're saying here in this meeting that your inclination is to say no to that proposal, which I'm with you.
I've already voted,
But-
well,
So,
table it.
but I'm asking, has this actually come up to vote? Have you
Yeah,
voted for
and
it?
we already tabled it, and he would like it to bring it to another vote, and if it gets to a vote, I'm gonna say no. I mean, that's where I am right now. The other point, and kinda I guess is now gone, but he and I have started to work on looking at where some of the pension payments are, the bond payments. Again, there was some sloppiness in the previous administration, and, you know, for example, there may be some money, bonded money, that has come to us from the state that, you know, if it's due to us, let's use it. You know, if it's not coming out of our pockets. So, and for myself, and as John very graciously noted, you know, I'm new to this. I readily admit that. You know, I don't profess any grand knowledge on this matter.
So again,
But I'm going to continue to educate myself and do what I can to help figure out what the heck this budget's about.
So you're new to this, but you're also the head of the finance committee?
The budget and appropriations,
For the
yes.
budget? Oh, for the budget, for the city council. How did you do that?
It was
It's
appointed.
appointed.
Qualified for that?
City council president.
I was appointed by the city council president.
Who's the city council president?
That doesn't mean I'm necessarily qualified.
And,
You need someone to do the work.
Scott has, people talk about you need to talk to experts, and John will attest to this. Scott has talked with John during the budget
He has more
process.
education than many of the people.
That's
on
right.
the
And that's,
council.
and also has
He's a
been
genius.
as well. So, and back to, if I could just add my 2 cents, quote unquote, I feel the same as Scott with regards to if there is a vote that is requesting anything that has not been budgeted for, it is getting, as far as I'm concerned, it is getting a no. The budget is the budget. I don't care if they find the money, it fell off a tree behind City Hall. That money needs to go into reserves, it's not gonna be spent on these new initiatives, these new ideas that have been brewing long before the budget was presented to us, and if they wanted it included, it should have been included in the first place. So there's this contingency fund. I refuse to vote for anything coming out of that fund unless it is directly related to property tax relief.
So that's all you have, you're just gonna vote no, you're not actually bringing anything else to the table?
Well,
In
at the
terms
last
of-
meeting, we had asked if you could have the mayor reconsider. Is that a possibility or no?
We did look into it.
Is that just a no?
Legally, it is not possible.
Per the city charter.
Yeah,
There's-
we would
there's
need a
nothing.
state
So
statute.
One of the things that we did look into was with this contingency fund was trying to create a rebate program of sorts. First targeting and aimed for seniors who have had an exorbitant tax increase period, to see if there was a way that we could rebate take this contingency fund and rebate money back.
Katie, would that be something we would actually be made aware of? Because I think one of the
Well,
problems
let
with
me,
the tax.
if I can finish.
So
Okay, can I just finish, can I finish my thought, if that's okay? We have been told Scott actually met with, members from the tax assessors, tax collector, the city attorney that deals with taxes and so on. We can't do anything right now because that would require a state statute, is what we were told. That it's not something that we could do. We pursued it. On the back of this, and again, Scott prepared this, on the flip side, there are opportunities, there's still opportunities to appeal your assessment.
Certain people.
For certain, on material issues at this point, you can't just go in and say, I feel I was over-assessed. You have to go in and say, you say I have a 4-bedroom house, I only have a 3-bedroom house. There is relief applications available. We'll get more information out on that for seniors and for veterans. So in terms of, you know, what else? Trying to also serve the community when I get requests about curbs that are broken and speed limit signs that need to be. But who cares? People do care because those are the requests that I get. So I spend time working on that as well because that's part of my job too, is to also help with quality of life issues. So,
right now, if I had to use a horse and carriage and you'd reduce my taxes, I'll take the horse and carriage.
all right. Well, that's fine, and then I'll let every people know that honey, we've had this conversation.
Our state representative here, I'd like to ask a question about our educational dollars that come back to the state, that are back to the city. We are by far underfunded when it comes to the needs base. We have many, many more kids who need special services. We have 160 languages spoken in our, and we used to have, up until 3 years ago, an educational cost
share.
ECF.
Still there.
And it is not, it's changed drastically in the last 3 years. And if that, according to what I understand, if it had been still in position, we would have gotten $15 billion more this year. But we didn't, and so I'm wondering, can we go back to a needs-based? Because, I'm sorry, Weston, but you don't need as much as
Well, they have a polo right,
so, you know, oh, but that's true, they have a polo.
So the ECS formula is extremely complicated. It's probably the subject of a full separate meeting. But the bottom line is, right now the city of Bridgeport gets $181 million in ECS funding. That's what we got this year in ECS funding. So break down that $560 million, $550 million budget we've been talking about this year. Okay, 180 of that comes from the state in terms of ECS funding. Another 40, 50, maybe close to even 60 million of that comes from the state in terms of direct aid on the municipal side. So roughly half of our budget, not quite, but half of that 550 million comes from state aid. The ECS formula specifically, to my knowledge, and again, I've only been in the legislature a year and a half, but as far as I've been there, the formula has not changed with one exception. This last year, as part of the state's budget crisis and us cutting roughly $900 million, we tweaked it a little bit for certain towns. A lot of these suburban towns, the governor proposed to zero out because they really don't need the money. They pushed back, they ended up getting half of their money back instead of a full zeroing out. But I'm not aware of a formula change. In terms of what we get vis-a-vis other towns, we do get less than Hartford, absolutely, and it's an absolute injustice that we do.
Less than Danbury?
Not in terms of total dollars, maybe per pupil, but in terms of total dollars, we get the second most of anybody in the state. It's New Haven gets about 200, little over 200 million. We get about 180 million. New Haven gets about 160 million.
Per pupil, per,
I guess that's the argument, and there is part of the reason is it's a little complicated in that two things happen. One, Hartford a number of years ago sued the state and basically said you have a constitutional duty to provide quality education. There was a settlement called in the Chef versus O'Neill. People probably are somewhat aware of this. And so there's court obligations that the legislature has to provide a certain amount to Hartford. we actually have a case, Bridgeport has a case pending through the court system similar that says, well, wait a minute, if it works for Hartford, it's gotta work for us too. I think our chances of success on that are pretty good, and if Bridgeport wins that, then the legislature will make our jobs as advocates for the city a little easier, because we'll be under a court mandate to, the rest of the legislature will be under a court mandate to basically do what we've been saying for a long time, which is, why are we getting less than Hartford? New Haven is a little different. New Haven actually took advantage a couple of years ago in sort of a tweak in state law, where if you built magnet schools, the state would fund 100% of the cost, as opposed to only getting 85% of the cost in school construction. Others can probably speak to this better than I can, but I guess at the time there wasn't sort of the appetite to go to build as many magnet schools as New Haven did, and so New Haven has sort of a separate system as a result of that.
Well, while you're mentioning that, when the previous interim superintendent of schools was here, the school was built up, the Fairchild Wheeler School.
Yeah.
It was proposed as one school. That interim superintendent saw the layout. He saw, instead of one magnet school, we got 3 magnet schools.
Yeah, we do.
So he went from 3 million to 11 million that he got from the state. Longfellow could have been a magnet school too. Not Longfellow, the recent iteration.
Yes.
It is a magnet school.
It's,
The one here in Black Rock?
it's not a getting state funded.
You're right, it's not a intertown.
Right.
It's inside the city, right? But it's
So it could have been, and for another, where money sticks around for a while. Again, some of the problems on that board of trying to find their way have left them out of, if we don't like the way you run a budget meeting, go over, and although I can ask a question over at those other, Scott, and it would be nice if, because my questions aren't that hard, it's just to get them on the record, because when you shut a meeting down and leave somebody with their hand up, it's too bad.
Yeah.
But the ECS, Steve, I think the ECS I've been told by Board of Ed that 3 years ago, that's it. It is, they're not honoring it because it is dysfunctional. The formula is broken. And so they've been doing it on an ad hoc basis. And the MBR has ground down to, for us, did you do more than last year with a small formula? So that leaves a town like ours against the 2 biggies, New Haven and Hartford, where those communities are putting in about half again as much as we are out of their municipal budget, and therefore they're getting more from the state. Maybe for different reasons, as you explained. But yeah, people have picked the pocket of the state when they could, and we haven't.
And we for a very, very long time, have settled, as a Bridgeport delegation, have settled for 80 cents on the dollar. And I'll tell you, as far as I'm concerned, those days are over. We had the last year and a half with the delegation we have, we've had great success. We brought more money back in this past year. I think if you add it up, then you'd be hard pressed to find a legislative delegation that brought more money back than we did last year. In a year, we cut $900 million.
I'm not doubting what you're saying. I'm just saying something in the room that the Connecticut Post has never said. And that is that on your council, and you may ask him to come and talk, on your council is a gentleman who has sat as chairman of the school building committee for 10 or more years. He's a city employee. Have you ever gotten a report from him on the $700 million that's come in, that we pay 20% of, right, Ken? And the state pays 80% of, and those assets are booked to the city. So, but we're not hearing about that, okay? And it should be open. And it should be, the council should be, because we have no finance board, the council should be getting all the information, but you gotta ask for it. And then Ken will be happy to give it to you, and Nestor will, and get it, and then call a press conference with the Connecticut Post once a week, or once a month, and make sure it gets into the press. Because we're not here.
I echo John's, the job the state delegation did, and Steve, this year. Bridgeport is a whole different, they were so ignored years ago compared to New Haven and Hartford, so I think there's some hope. And also just you know, Katie and Scott were probably gonna mention, but I'd just like to compliment, you know, they're leading an effort to push the mayor, and I think the mayor is bought into the idea of stimulating tax relief for seniors and trying to do more. I'm hoping over the next few months we'll be coming up with proposals, but I know they're both working on that, so, you know, I just wanna give them a little complimentary on that.
Is there anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak yet that would like to? Yes, sir.
Leave here with something clear. It just strikes me that the whole conversation started with an idea that some huge percentage, call it 75 for the sake of this, of the budget available for cuts is fixed. And that strikes me as kind of crazy to start as a starting point, because then, like you've all said all night, all the cuts that you look at are tiny. They're just not going to make any difference for the budget. So it seems like we should be having some sort of conversation about what you guys can do to fight that idea that it's fixed. I understand that legislatively it's probably really, really hard to go after the police and fire pensions, but that's the elephant in the room. And if we start the whole conversation, if the council's starting the whole conversation by saying, okay, let's put that aside, it's fixed, then it's over. Like, everything else you do is kind of a joke. And voting no for the budget with that as a principle would be a start. And look, Ganem can't do it, right? The police, I'm no political consultant, but it seems to me the police played some major role in getting them elected, so you can't do it. So if, that's the other thing, right? Would a specific question, would a financial review board allow that separation such that they could be the people, if you can't do it, and the mayor's certainly not going to do it,
well,
to be like, that's the elephant in the room, let's say we...
Yeah, you know, I would have said that whatever financial control board would do would have to be, you know, designed, constructed, and figure out what their authority would be. You know, the flip side is, you know, when you're looking at, you know, when we say fixed cost, I mean, you have X number of police, X number of fire, X number of teachers, and so much of a municipal budget is salary. So, you know, I mean, there are, you know, you can either do with fewer teachers, fewer cops, or, you know, a lot of things. But that's not an inaccurate starting point. But I think the bigger issue really is, as we're saying, there are, you know, large structural issues in terms of how taxation functions here in the state. I would argue nationally about how we, you know, fund ourselves as a nation. And I think we see that out, you know, in the national arena.
Let's go
so,
back.
I mean, we can't do anything about that besides vote in November. But, you know, we've got big issues that need addressing, and did we cut all this year that we wanted to, that I wanted to? No, I mean, there are things that I got overruled in committee.
But it sounds like we
but these are, I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about a few percent. It's not the large structural things that, you know, through the state legislature that we can kind of tackle.
Let's go back
it's a fair point.
Let's go back even further. Look at how these structural deficits came into place, right? It's not this city council, the city council before them, or the city council before that even. I mean, these are structural deficits and structural obligations and pension obligations that have accrued over decades, and really accrued, for anybody who saw my op-ed on Tuesday in the paper, really this stuff accrued over the last 40 years. As Bridgeport really built itself into this industrial mecca powerhouse that really funded and was the economic driver of the state, and we bought ourselves sort of this large-scale government, this large-scale fire department, police department, right? And then what happened is we as a state led the race out of the cities into the suburbs, the suburban office park, okay? That left those of us here in the cities to bear that cost that most of us didn't incur, that occurred, you know, a generation or 2 generations or even 3 generations ago, and we're left picking up the tab for. So because we were the economic driver for the state.
That's
So
right.
for the state to basically turn a blind eye to it and say, nope, that's a local problem, that's Bridgeport's problem, deal with it through your property taxes, is fundamentally inequitable, and is fundamentally backward.
It's almost
Because
unconstitutional.
because
That's what we
we're
should look
sitting
at.
here, saying, and that's my
You guys are doing a great job.
and that's my point about sort of this needs to be a broader conversation than just Bridgeport. I mean, the anger here and the frustration, I think some of it needs to be directed sort of at the whole system statewide, and we need to team up with people who are just as frustrated as we are, living in Hartford and Waterbury, New Haven, and elsewhere, and say, you know what? You want to turn the economy of the state of Connecticut around? It's got to start with the cities, because young professionals and businesses are moving back to dynamic, livable, walkable cities, and we don't have it. We don't have it
We
because
can't
we don't.
expect you
we
to be
don't
successful trying to tell a guy in Greenwich that he should pay some of our bills. It's not gonna.
But you know what? I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna keep doing it. You guys keep setting me up to it. I'm gonna keep doing it. But I need other people to do it.
Yeah, there needs to
So
be
what else
other.
can we do? Because we're totally behind.
Did you read my outline on Tuesday? What's your email? Anybody who didn't get it, I'll send it to you.
I don't mean to cut this short, but we were only supposed to have
Kate,
a room
one
till 9
question,
o'clock,
one
and I think
final
the
question.
guy's been sitting at the desk kind of looking in here, turning off
Kate,
lights.
Kate, I
turning
just
off
wanna know one
lights.
thing. Is there any way of phasing in the reevaluation? Because they've done it before. They've been phasing this.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they have.
That's true.
I spoke to Ken and others in the administration. It's
Were
conceivable,
they phased in? Okay.
but my understanding
I
is that
I was not aware that that was
It
possible.
works if it comes, unless the pain, it reduces the
Does
pain.
reduce the pain.
I don't
That's my
pay so
understanding.
much.
That's
It gives
my
me a little breathing, you know, on a $10,000 increase is a lot of money.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I really do, I feel kind of bad that we're kind of overstaying longer,
Thank you, guys.
45 minutes.
Thank you for everyone coming out.
Anybody is interested in seeing some of the other work that we've done, feel free to contact us.